Good afternoon. I am Dr. Nsenga Burton, and welcome to the NNPA The Burton Wires live stream, where we are discussing that riveting interview with the royal couple, Prince Harry and Duchess Meghan Markle. I'd like to welcome my two guests today, Dr. Mark Cunningham, who is a regular on this show, so you all already know him, but a professor of pop culture and everything fabulous. And then, of course, Yvonne Yancy, who is a 25-year HR veteran, a pop culture, I call her a pop cultural sponge, but definitely an enthusiast and a commentator. So Yvonne wrote a fantastic essay article for me for the Burton Wire about some of the issues that were raised during that wonderful interview with Oprah Winfrey.
So you wrote that.
Yes. So we're going to get into this today, but I'm going to start with Mark because I want to talk about Oprah Winfrey and just the great television that she knows how to give. Can you talk a little bit about Oprah Winfrey and her influence on this type of interviewing and this type of television that we're seeing?
I think I've seen some people be critical of Oprah online and about, she didn't ask the hard hitting questions, right? But there's a way Oprah does that, right? That she can finesse the situation. And I think she knew that she was kind of walking into some kind of very, kind of volatile ground or volatile terrain, if you will. And so she know there were certain ways that certain things needed to be asked, that she couldn't just come in and do a TMZ. I think Oprah knew, this is the queen and she knows the kind of international, impact that this has. And so I think Oprah is very keen and very astute and very aware about that kinds of thing. And plus too, with the whole notion of celebrity, I think she really knows how to kind of balance that line. And look, I mean, to me, she didn't need to be any more incendiary than she was. I mean, the topic and what they discussed was already, I think, explosive enough. And it didn't need this kind of tabloid approaches, which is what I really think people wanted Oprah to do. But Oprah has never really kind of, done that. That's never been her way, right? And so, and you and I both know that, and all of us know that, a lot of the reason Oprah is able to do what she does is because people trust her. There is this motherliness, this earth mother, this thing that she has, right? That people, find comforting and don't mind spilling their guts to her.
Yeah, and her expressions. I mean, I was loving. I was recalling this interview with my yesterday. We were discussing it, and I was like, Oprah's expressions alone asked the questions for her. Because I was joking about when Harry said that he was trapped in the system, and she rolled back and looked at him like, you want to say something. Yes, you did it better.
Yeah.
But she knew, like, boy, is you crazy? I mean, we can hear that.
That's why Oprah makes such good memes and good gifts. Because
absolutely.
That's why.
Right, with her training. Yvonne, why don't you talk to us a little bit about the interview? Because I know you watched the interview, you watched the lead up to the interview, you watched the CBS Morning post interview with the BFF Gayle King, reading all of the publications, you watched Good Morning Britain. So just go ahead, girl, pull us in.
Would you like a summary? I confess, I am a pop culture aficionado, and my mother, the history professor, is obsessed with all things European history, all chronicling stories and shows. And so I get that from her. So yes, I watched everything. And I was like, oh, the interview's coming. Let me get some fudge and a glass of wine. Can't wait. So I think that the interview went exactly the way Meghan, the Duchess, and the Prince wanted it to go. They wanted to put out for the first time what their point of view was, their experience, and no offense, we've had COVID for a year, technically, and they would have put this out like a year ago, but they couldn't, and it was inappropriate. But this is a great moment. I think you're spot on about Oprah. People trust Oprah. She was talking about how before I interview, I say, what is your intention? And I tell you my intention. And then she does the interview. So he would feel very comfortable because they're clear up front about what they want to get out of it. If she thinks it's a good idea, she's clear she's going to help them accomplish that goal. Right. So we can check the box. We know exactly how the Duchess and the Prince feel. And we know exactly, we have now validated or invalidated that entire stream of data that came out after they left on their own. First, they're being supported by Prince Charles. Guess not being supported by Prince Charles. They were going to have a time to come back, maybe. They're never going back.
Right.
You couldn't be half in, half out. But there are royals who are half in, half out. Just not them. Why? The whole thing around the title and what happens with Archie. And I think that the Duchess played that exceptionally well, because every brown person in the world can relate to being invisible by people who are not brown. And what she said was, I married into the longest running monarchy. That's really German. Let's get technical. But they rule the UK. And they decided that my brown child was not worthy of George V's convention, that they were going to change the convention from 1917 that said the grandchildren of the monarch carry the title. Now, he's a great-grandchild, but they extended that to whose child? Will's.
Yeah.
And then rather than have him automatically receive it when Charles becomes king, if that ever happens, because Queen Elizabeth is never going to leave us, apparently.
Yeah.
Whenever that happens, they were going to change the convention to keep him from getting the title. They didn't just say, we're not going to do an exception. They said, when he earns it, we're going to get rid of that.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Why is that exactly?
Yeah.
From 1917.
Right.
What happened now to make that not appropriate?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you raised some very good points. And this, one of the things that was so great about this particular interview were the bombshells that were leaked. Because sometimes, you know, when you watch an interview, and even especially those kind of primetime interviews, if you are a fan of a certain entertainer or a fan of a certain politician or what have you, you may or may not already know a lot of the information. But I think that what was explosive about this, and hi, Jessetta, what was explosive about this was that we did learn all of this information that had just not been made privy, right? So most people were taking their information from the British media, the British tabloids, and then, of course, being reported by entertainment reporters here in the United States. But what we learned directly from them was what was really going on behind the scenes. Really how tumultuous it was. Mark, can you talk about that a little bit in terms of how celebrity functions in our society? And why you think people might have been shocked? Because we know you did the whole thing, Yvonne, like how this all came about. We know that there's racism, rampant racism all over Europe. And we know about Great Britain's colonizing past that has agreed foothold here in the United States. So this whole thing about people being surprised that, you know, the royal family was discriminating against their own grandchild, great-grandchild, if you talk about Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, you know, I mean, and I admit, even as, you know, as an American myself, right, you know, there's, you know, my knowledge, I argue, has been extended a lot about the monarchy from watching The Crown. You know, I have to admit, you know, and which has caused me to do a lot more research about this, you know, about this family and the way everything is structured than I ever would have done, probably. You know, and of course I was, you know, in terms of Diana, invested in that and what happened with her. And I really, you know, liked her and her approach, whatever. But yeah, but I mean, but there was a part of me even about Meagham, and Meagham herself even said, the Duchess herself said that she went into this situation naive, right? And she's coming from this background, right? Not only is she a Black woman, but or a woman of color, but she also, you know, was an actress. She'd already been married twice. So she was coming, I mean, she was a little worse off in terms of past than Camilla was, right? You know, in that regard. She was coming in, you know, a little, you know, even rougher, right? And so, you know, Harry is his mother's child, right? In so many ways, right? But I think from a celebrity standpoint, right, I think that we as a culture have in our mind how these things work, right? And the royals are celebrities. I mean, I know we probably don't think of them that way, but they really and truly are. And so I, you know, and just since all of this has happened, I've been reading, and there's still these people that the interview didn't do anything but just grow their hate for Meghan. Not for Harry, but for Meghan. It just increased it. And then you have people, I think there are more people, I think, that are American that sided with her.
Okay.
Than there were that was British. But I think that, you know, they are in this kind of, you know, this fishbowl, and we're looking at them and kind of deciding what we, you know, think what we know happens and whatever else. And there are these structures and stuff. Like, for example, when she made the comment about that there's the firm and then there's the family. Like that
and
was
HR. She said she called
and HR. Yeah, that was interesting to me. You know, so I just think that there are some things that are happening within that structure, right, that kind of extend the bounds of celebrity. That this is much bigger than, to me, the way we kind of think of, like, you know, hey, what's Regina King wearing? You know, or, you know, what, who is Brad Pitt sleeping with? What what this is in terms of celebrity culture and the way we think about celebrity culture and star culture and what have you, to me, extends much bigger than that, because there's so many other components that are at work, legal and government and historical components at work.
And that is a great segue to our guest, Yvonne Cowser Yancy, because a lot of the things that are being talked about, and we're going to talk about this interview, we're going to get back to that real quick, but I wanted to talk about and I want to say hi to our guests who are coming in. Keith Winston. Did I go to high school with Keith Winston? Keith Winston and some other folks. Michelle Madison, thank you for the shout out. Josetta Outlaw, my line sister. Thank you for the shout out. But one of the things I think is interesting about the celebrity moment now is what's happening with the Me Too, Time's Up, and all of this like diversity and inclusion work that's happening around the Hollywood industry. And I think that, you know, when Meghan, like, because I was like incredulous, like, really, there's HR, and she thought there was a union or something. Yeah. But I would like for you to talk about the ways in which human resources kind of dovetail with celebrity and the movements that are kind of happening that kind of lead to these kinds of awakening, so to speak, such that people are now talking about racism as if it did not exist in the royal family. Right. Racism as a problem now in the royal family.
Right. Well, I think that's a great question. And yes, they have an HR person in the firm because they are an industry and they are an arm of de facto government. And so, you know, the British public, I mean, there are more than 60 Independence Days for a reason in the Commonwealth, because they ran everything. The sun did not set on the kingdom. So the structure of the firm does in fact have a myriad of employees, and the royal family is employed. They receive a dispensation from the government. And so if she'd been a paid member of the family, then that complaint might have been taken differently. But she was not a paid member of the family. So they're like, thanks for stopping by. But the intersection of Me Too and talking about race in a very different way is, I think, very timely because of where we are right now. We just spent a year at home, almost exactly for some of us. And the realization of the world is different when you're sitting at home and you can't go anyplace else. I mean, we all know that there was more than, George Floyd did not start police brutality conversations. Right. But for some folks, that's the first time they started a police brutality conversation. And I mean, I'm glad that they're here at the party, but you know, the party's been going on for a long time. And so the impact of that has been amplified because of the experience people have had in their own isolation, and they cannot turn away from that video, for example. Me Too has been amplified because we've had all the people have the time and energy to say, oh, that's your post for Women's History Month. Oh, okay. Let me remind you don't pay women. Let me remind you when, you know, we're talking about Governor Cuomo, you know, he's got a long career. People who harass don't harass one person. There's never one mouse. He's talking about mice. People who harass people at work and treat you badly, treat lots of people badly. They got the time and energy to come forward now in a way they did not before. And so I think there's a generational component to this. There's an expectation of what's going to happen for people under the age of 30 and over the age of 30, 40 maybe, depending on the spaces. I also think there's an acceptance of it happening now. So, you know, the royal family is German. They changed their name during World War II, I think. I forget the exact year. I'm not a historian, don't quote me, but you can Google it. They did change their name so that they would look less German while they were fighting the Germans. Queen Elizabeth picked the House of Windsor. That was a decision that was made. And so Diana was more British than the royal family. She came from the Spencer family that was in fact around for hundreds of years before the Windsors were created. So, you know, the idea that their structure could be racist is not new. They invented colonialism. Of course they can be racist. And Duchess Meagham is not the first mixed race person in this family. She's the first acknowledged one. But historians talk about Queen Charlotte and other people who came down those family lines. So, you know, today the problem is the brand, and the family exists because of the brand. Harry and his brother and his sister-in-law, Kate, had this mental health initiative they've been touting now for years, actually. His mother, Diana, talked about how she wanted to commit suicide in her historic interview that happened many years ago when she talked about how there were 3 of them in the marriage. The other bombshell was, I was suicidal. I used to cut my wrist. I used to cut myself. And so to think that 40 years later, they still can't deal with how women come into this family. To your point, they all had a rough time, but she wasn't an 18-year-old, 19-year-old Diana. She's a 35-year-old. Right. I made my own 7 figures. I have an ex-husband, and I am a Black woman. She's mixed race. She's a Black woman. She understands what it looks like when you ask her what color baby's going to be. That's a different conversation. And so that's not, is it going to have red hair or not? That is not that kind of conversation. So, those worlds intersect differently now. And we feel differently about articulating those issues now than we did 5, 10 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, very good. Yeah, this whole issue of race and what it looks like. Meghan, who identifies as biracial or mixed race, then partnering with someone who is supposed to represent white culture at its whitest and pure white race, so to speak, and bloodlines and all of that coursing through folks' veins. But it was interesting because I was sitting there while I was thinking about it and watching it. I was like, okay, so here's this woman who grew up in the segregated South. This is Oprah Winfrey. And she's interviewing, this one couple who really they're in love. They want to be together. It's them against the world. It's like the Bonnie and Clyde of this upper echelon society, right? All they want to do is be together and be in love, and the world literally is working against them, and their families are working against them. So I think it was interesting in that interview to see how, at least on the American side, I think the critique shifted from how is she going to fit into this royal family versus to move from that to she cannot fit into the royal family because the white supremacist system of patriarchy and everything else, economics, what have you, is so much of so central to the identity of the family that no one really outside of the family can really fit in. Right. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah. I think if you look at, and I watched The Crown too, but if you look at all of these women who've married into the family, they've all had trauma. Right? For different reasons. And they had different backstories and different backgrounds. These were not peasants who became royal. They came from families. They came from money. They came from title. So they had been trained to accept the royal family, and they found themselves broken and in difficulty as well. So it's just said a lot about how the firm, as they refer to it, decides you're going to operate. And you would think at this point, Harry and Meghan were supposed to be like the dawn of this new part of the monarchy. They were supposed to help invigorate, and really show in a great way how far the monarchy had come. They were going to help modernize it because she looked like the Commonwealth, right? Remember that? And they just totally blew it. They completely shot that to, wherever. And so the fact that no matter where you come from, you get broken in this family is noteworthy. And certainly this person coming in the family, she was an actual adult. She was not someone who's going to be molded in some other plan. But I do fault Harry a little bit.
Okay, why?
Because he needed to prepare her a little bit more than he did. He was a little naive too. It's going to be fine. They love you. They're not going to. The first thing she went to, Michael, Princess of Kent, wore the blackface pin. It's not going to be fine. Some people are going to have a hard time with this. And I don't know how transparent they did not present as though that was something that was transparent from the very beginning, and it should have, because we all thought it. So I don't know how she couldn't think it.
Right.
But I was going to say that it reminds me. You mentioned The Crown, and there's a line in The Crown. This is some of the reason why I think the most recent season of that show is causing such. It's such a problem for people in England in particular, have really commented about it and wanted these kind of notices, put up before episodes and all this other stuff that happened, is because now you're going to kind of start seeing chinks in the armor now as we move further down the line into this story. But I love that scene between, Prince Charles and Geraldine Chaplin. I think it was Wallace Simpson that she played, whatever. And he says that the family means well, and she says, no, they don't. And to me, and I was like, that to me said everything. But I think that, you're right. This whole sense of naivete, right, that kind of surrounds all of this. I have no connection to the royals whatsoever at all. And even I know that if I went over there and tried to get into that family, it was going to be a struggle. It was going to be hard, right? And you're right about Harry. And I'm gonna tell you something too about Harry. And I told a friend of mine this, that I was looking at the interview, and I sensed some strain between them. And she was like, my friend's like, oh no, I don't see love. I said, yeah, but y'all want to see this love story, and you're looking at it through, I think a lot of people are looking at through these kind of rose-colored glasses, so to speak, if I may be so cliche to say that. But to me, I was left with the impression about Harry is, how long is he going to continue to pick this woman over his family? Because because look, she's used to the kind of life they're living. He is not. He looks comfortable in that chicken coop to me. He looks uncomfortable in these spaces. He looks very awkward in these spaces. And you're going to give up a life that you've been born into, and you're going to continue to pick this woman. I don't know how long he's going to do that. I'm sorry. That's just how I read it. And I don't know them from a hole in the wall, but that's how
two people on this show actually have a bet going right now.
Exactly.
On how long it was going to last from the wedding. Two people who shall remain nameless.
Exactly.
But yes, Kanika is tuning in, one of our other co-stars sometimes. Hey, Kanika. And Josetta wants to know, was Meghan naive too? And I can't. I don't get that. Like, I think
she was. Yes. Look, she was totally naive. Yeah.
But let me just say this. Look, I think Meghan wanted what Meghan wanted, because Meghan gets what Meghan gets, and that's not a bad thing. So when people are like, oh, they try to put everything at Meghan's feet, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about Meghan is highly intelligent, very well raised, very well educated, and very accomplished. She's had a job since she was 13.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so I see her as someone who gets what she wants. So whether I know she was set up with Harry, they were set up by a mutual friend or whatever. The fact they have a mutual friend is telling already. And so I don't think it is as much naivete as it was shock that she was not going to be able to overcome this particular boundary, because she had gotten to the point of where she was chosen. She was the bride. She got over being biracial or Black, however you want to define her. She defines herself as biracial, right? She got over being American. She got over being an actress. She got over being a 2-time divorcee. She had more money than him, right? Because she earned her money. She didn't inherit anything. So if we look at who has the money and who does the work, it's her, right? She got over all of that, and so I think it was less naivete and more like shock that she could not make them do what she needed them to do in order for her to be welcome and to feel welcome in that family.
Well, and there are some other little nuggets she dropped off in these conversations, right? She knew Princess Eugenie before she knew Harry. She was already in those circles. So I was comfortable because I already knew her. And she thought, as she presented that, that it was sort of like celebrity. Because if you're in LA, or you see Atlanta now has lots of films and stuff, when you see celebrities, you see them in the grocery store, and then you see them like when they're at work. And so she did not think this curtsying stuff happened when they were with the family. Yeah, they're like, no, she's always the queen. Do you know how to curtsy?
Yeah, you know how to curtsy.
So that was her first sort of understanding that our idea of royalty is, kind of the crown, right? And also that when they go inside, they turn it off and they go have dinner with the family for Christmas. No, they bow at Christmas and they ask permission, and they can't just pick up the phone and call. And so, and that's different from like our families. But the naivete is that when she said, I didn't Google Harry, I thought to myself, now, listen, I mean, I Googled you before I got on this podcast with I was like, who is this Mark Cunningham? Tell me more. And so, are we to believe that she did not Google Harry to understand who Harry, Prince of Wales was? I mean, give me a break. So I found that to be
she called her. Girl, tell me about your cousin Harry.
Exactly. Eugenie had to say something. I mean, she didn't just walk into the Prince for a beverage and think, oh, now I'll go to Africa on a safari, and I don't have any idea where he came from. I mean, come on. So
do you all think though that she's used to her biracial, whatever, getting her over in certain places, and it just didn't work with these people?
Yeah, I was trying not to bring that up with all the light-skinned people on this show right here. But I was thinking, you know, like that light skin privilege that really works in the United States. Like, let's keep that real. And white privilege, and then light skin privilege, and then biracial privilege. These things that kind of work in the United States and within our system of how we define race and how race is tied inextricably to your upward mobility. And even your skin color is tied to your upward mobility, particularly over the time period that we've been here in the United States. But yeah, I think she miscalculated. I think she thought that light skin or that biracial identity was going to translate and all that love that you get in the United States for those things was going to translate over in the UK, and it did not.
They showed her how black she was.
Well, not just that. I mean, we created the one drop mythology, right? But she has the capacity to, move in and out of spaces and identify when she chooses, right? Yeah, the way the media works in the UK, which I thought they also did a very good job of explaining how much the media drives the royal family's behaviors, because there's no singular media here that we then all do what they say. Well, maybe not anymore, Fox, but there's no single periodical that gets published and then there's an immediate response from the government, right? So they don't allow that it coming in and out. How they define blackness, how they define color is totally different. And she is unequivocally, whether it's visible or not. They were like, is it going to reach back? They were calling her the girl from Compton. Forget so that system did not allow that at all. And they did, colonize the world. They've seen a lot of mixed race people.
Yes.
In the Commonwealth, and they had not married the royal family. I think there's a dividing line. The royal family is a reflection of Britain. I saw a commentator talk about this on CNN last night. I can't think of her name. She's a U.S. citizen who's black who lives in London. And what she said was that royal families are a reflection of British people. And so Meghan simply being present as a part of the family is a reflection they reject.
Right.
Full stop.
Right.
Because their culture's changing just like our culture's changing. They're going to become majority minority, just like the U.S. is going to be majority minority. And they don't really care for that. They don't call it black. They call it other stuff. But they have a real issue with that. And Meghan and this cute little baby that they never showed the picture, when they put the picture out, we were like, can we see the baby's face? Remember that? They didn't show his face. We could see his face for like another month or so. Like, what color is the baby? That's the question you want to answer. They just showed the top of his head, like he had red hair. That's it. So that was not a reflection that the British people were willing to accept.
Right. And I'd like to just pop in here with another historical factor too, because one of the things I kind of had a very robust discussion with someone about is when we think about the UK too, and we think about Europe and, the US, we focus so much on skin color, but they also focus on not only skin color, but also hair color and eye color. Yes. And these kind of differentiations between races really started there with the differentiation between skin color and eye color. And so the skin color piece that made it to the US is an extension of the hair color, eye color, and why all of those things are always talked about in tandem with one another. And so I was thinking about when they were worried about what color he was going to be. I was like, they're worried about if he's going to have blue eyes or red hair or blonde hair. They're worried about that too. So it's not just the skin color that they're concerned about. But they're also worried about these other things that in the US we don't really think about. Like there is, so-and-so has pretty eyes. We know what that means, right? Oh, they're gray, they're hazel, they're green, they're blue, right? Especially a black person with those things, right? But, I don't think that we're thinking about this issue of identity through that lens either. And I think it's important.
I totally agree.
And the way that they worry, like you say, about lineage and things of that nature, like where, really it's truly for them, like, who are your people? Like literally, like they really want to know who are your people. And they mean that down the line. And I think that she just, like you think, I think she underestimated that in a lot of ways. And I think she thought she was, well, you know what? No, I'm kind of like now at first, she used the word naive, but I now that we sit here and talk about it more and more, I mean, I'm with you on that. Nsenga. I think that she went in there and she got her feelings hurt. I think she went in there and she thought she was going to be able to overcome things like she's all. Well, let's just say I'm not going to say through like that, but as I assume she's always able to do, right? I mean, because you and I both know that when you look at her head on, you would probably think she was a white woman. head on, probably.
Well, not just that.
They were doing know better, right? We know that she's not, right? And so that kind of infuses the way we look. I mean, that kind of informs the way we look at her. But I'm just saying, but when we, but I think there's a way, right, that she may be passing here in some ways, right? And they met her at the door with that, because all of that had come out.
And they have been doing, I saw this really, if nothing else, this experience has taught us how racist media is across the world as they cover this. There was one show in Britain, and they had her picture and Kate Middleton's picture, and they're like, see, they have the same hair, their noses are shaped the same way. Why look at this? I don't see a woman of color. And then they showed a woman of color, and that meant African. Okay, now this woman is a woman of color. This woman, Duchess Meagham, she's not a woman of color. What is she talking about? And they're like, you talked about her as a woman of color. You covered her radically different, like the radioactive avocado toast compared to Kate's healthy avocado toast. So they keep trying to explain away they're not really racist. Or my favorite new phrase, it was just casual racism. When someone related to you makes some sort of casual racist remark, they don't really mean racism. They're just expressing a point of view that's older. I was like, oh, what's a new phrase? Casual racism.
Casual racism.
Well, it's casual racism. It's like, what is it? Out black person. Like all this stuff is kind of emerging in these conversations around diversity and inclusion. Like, oh my God, we didn't know that Megan was going to show up and actually be like a black person. Like she
can be black. Right.
And how that kind of plays out in the United States. And I hate that we don't have anybody who identifies as biracial on this talk right now, because we really need that. So I apologize to my viewers if you are feeling underrepresented or not represented. Hey, Melba, how are you? So let's go back to this interview. Let's go back to Queen Oprah, because like she's a queen, right?
She is the queen.
I'm looking at this interview and I'm like, there's the prince, there's the Duchess, but there's the queen, right? So she can get invited to the wedding and not have met Meghan, right? But she's on the guest list. She gets the interview even though she's been retired now for a number of years, right? A decade. So when I think about Oprah Winfrey and the idea of staying power, right? The idea of like, really, you can do anything you want in the world. When I think about folks who are kind of walking in her footsteps and just, even though they're well known and very popular, just do not have the respect that she has and the ability to get those kinds of interviews with people. Just a little bit about like Oprah Winfrey and what she means in terms of this whole concept of talk, right? This idea of talk show hosting. Kind of like, in my mind, she elevates it. I mean, Donahue was great, but she elevated it, and she started out not that way, but she elevated it to such a point now where it just cannot be surpassed. Like she's the Serena Williams of talk, in my mind.
Well, I think this is the way that Oprah Winfrey, there's this understanding with a lot of people that if she's doing the interview, then somehow this is more legitimate than if somebody else was doing it. It's more valid than if somebody else was doing it. That, as I mentioned before, that Oprah is in fact, not going to be salacious. She's not going to be, she's not going to hit below the belt. She's going to be straightforward, but there's a way that she's going to do it that, I guess for lack of a better word, with some class, right? And I think that's the way that people read Oprah, and like I said, and again, and why this level of comfort that she gives. I mean, there's this way even in Oprah's voice. As much as you talk about her facial expressions, I teach this in one of my media courses about the way Oprah's voice in this, and it was a commercial that was done for the Super Bowl some years ago. It was a Jeep commercial, and I was telling my students like some of the reasons we use Oprah's voice is because of that calming effect that she has, that level of assuredness that she gives to an audience or whatever. And I think all of that becomes very important in doing an interview like this, where we're already expecting it to be a hot button, kind of explosive situation, and then that there is this weight, right? This journalistic weight, this weight of class, I think that Oprah brings to the proceedings.
But don't you think she earned that too? Because I can remember many, many moons ago, we were in college. You could go to the Oprah show on a Tuesday.
Yes. Yes.
She was not doing, you know, trust me stories about the prince, right? She was talking about like the transgender teacher. And so she came a long way to get to that trusted space. And when she sort of ascended to the Donahue crown, whatever, and then went beyond that clearly in terms of living her best self, her best life and changing it to an inspirational moment. She pivoted, but she had crazy shows, you know, a long time ago, right? But I think people, to your point, they trust her, and she does have, there is an innate thing that's required for people to feel they can tell you all of their business, and that it's not a chat between me and you. It's really on TV. And she was really good at pulling that out of people. And let's be honest, if that interview was going to be a train wreck, you know, it wouldn't have been Oprah doing it.
Right.
I don't think Oprah would have signed up for the train wreck. Right.
And I think that because she has that trust, people do tell her things that they wouldn't necessarily tell someone else, because they know that she has been, you know, the victim, if you want to say that, or she's been, you know, she's a public figure, but she has been tabloid fodder, right? She has been hounded and policed and told what she was supposed to do and who she's supposed to be as a Black woman. You know, particularly in this industry, because she was breaking ground and breaking new ground at the level in which she was working. So I think that that's the other part of that, because she is a celebrity in the way that they are celebrities, although she's even more famous than they are in some ways. You know, I think they understand that she understands what they're going through. And so she would have a more realistic type of conversation with them and would be more protective, I would say, of them. So she wouldn't ask like the exploitive or abusive questions that someone like a Piers Morgan or a Wendy Williams or people who are kind of in that category would do, where they're just like, oh, hey, come on. And then they're like, hey, so, you know, they ask the most, you know, ridiculous questions.
Your grandmama don't like you.
Yes. But even if Oprah said, does the queen hate you? We'd be like, well, does she really? I mean, because
I believe it.
Oprah saying, tell me about this baby color thing, Harry. Like Meghan told us about this the skin color. Who said it? If Wendy had done that twice, we'd be like, why is Wendy being intrusive? Oprah doing it twice, like, yeah, girl, get the answer. Tell us.
But you know, but there's a way I think that, like you were saying, that Oprah, once they say that they don't want to talk about it or they don't feel comfortable, she leaves it alone. She doesn't keep needling the situation. Because there were some moments I think that both Kate and Harry were kind of bojangling around these questions she was asking. and she and Oprah just said, okay, they ain't gonna talk about that. Let me move on to the next thing. And like even when she couldn't get an answer out of Kate, she did come back and try to get one out of Harry. I mean Meagham, I'm sorry. Ooh, I said Kate. Ooh.
Twice.
Okay. I'm sorry, but she did an answer out of Meagham. Then she turned around and tried to get one out of Harry.
Circle back to Harry twice, like back to this baby part. Tell me more about that.
And Harry did, you know, and I'm sorry, you know, Harry has his Black wife, whatever. Harry did still hold it up for the family and did not tell it.
Exactly.
Oh yeah. I was texting, I think Yvonne. I was like, where's William? Why doesn't William have his brother's back? What's going on? What do you mean Charles cut you off and it wasn't talking to you, not taking your call? Daddy doesn't take their child's call. Like what is this?
Well,
the dysfunction junction that they are.
Yeah. So, Alexis Davis Smith, one of my besties. Hey. What do you think of Wendell Pierce's, who played Meghan's dad on Suits, comment saying that the interview was insignificant considering all that's going on right now, calling it palace gossip? Alexis, stop with those good questions. Listen, some of us can walk and chew gum at the same time. So just because we're talking about this doesn't mean I wasn't writing about Jonathan Ferrell and Kendrick Johnson an hour ago. All right. So I think that those kinds of comments are limiting. And I love Wendell Pierce. I actually was trying to interview him like a month ago. And I love his politics and I love that he's active and informed and all of that. But we can do more than one thing at one time. And so having this conversation is okay.
But not just that, though. I had a Facebook debate with a high school friend about this, too. It's significant because it's the longest serving monarchy in the world. It matters. When Diana touched a person with AIDS, it changed what happened to people with AIDS in that country. And so, yes, they're insignificant and they live, you know, tepid lives, but they are also supported by a taxpayer dime. They have untold wealth and influence because they don't report it. They are required to. The queen is the wealthiest person in the globe. And so their inability to talk about race impacts how other people talk about race. So I'm not unaware. They're going to be fine. Harry and Meghan are not going to miss any meals, as my father would say. They're going to live a good life. Right?
Yeah.
We're talking about the difference between $20 million, right? $20 million or $100 million. Like, they're fine. But this conversation around mental health and capacity and race is real. Them talking about it radically shifts the needle on those topics. So yes, they're insignificant people, but what they represent is not. I mean, they're like more than 60 Independence Days from the UK for a reason. That's the world.
Yeah.
And Wendell Pierce is not being attacked in the press the way she is. And I do think there is a part of her that kind of wants to set the record straight and kind of like, look, let's untangle some of this stuff, because there are a lot of lies and a lot of theories and a lot of perceptions out in the world about what actually has gone on in this situation. And so even if we didn't get any definitive answers in some ways about certain things, we at least have gotten some things cleared up. And I think you're so right, Yvonne, about the fact that this is kind of work. This is like international news, and it has an international effect, particularly, like you say, again, the way that we think about race, the way that we think about the mental health thing, I think that's incredibly important to discuss that, and this idea too, if you go back to what you were saying too, Nsenga, about celebrity and this idea, right, that somehow, right, they're beyond being affected by mental health issues and things of that nature because they do have money. But in fact, right, this stuff does hurt. It did, being in that space did not serve her or protect her in any kind of way at all. That does need to be known.
And I like that you said that, Mark, because the idea is, and we're all co-signing on each other's stuff, but I like the idea that, when Harry said that all of this treatment, this mistreatment, all of the things that he had gone through, or him watching his mother go through that hurt him, that's going to open up space for somebody else, right?
Right.
To say that all of this stuff that I'm going through as a man, and I'm not supposed to be able to say anything about it because I'm supposed to be a man. So imagine being not that I feel sorry for white men, let me say this, but imagine, not all white men, some, yes, it depends. But in terms of the whole, what do you call it? The whole idea of white maleness and the strength you're supposed to have. And the fact that you do have 60 plus independent days, because you literally marched around the world and taken stuff from people, right?
Right.
I mean, pilfered actual continents.
Yes, whole continents. So what does it mean if you are sensitive? What does it mean if you're like, well, I know that my family has these racist tendencies or beliefs, but I don't have them. I don't share them. What does it mean when people have the expectation that you're supposed to walk in lockstep with your grandfather and your father and your brother, and you do something differently, And we know Harry, because Harry was a little shaky there. With the naked pictures of this and all that kind of stuff. So he was a little shaky for a minute, but as a young man, he was a little shaky, but he pulled himself together, right? But what does that mean when you are not perfect, when you do make bad decisions, when you do want to do better for yourself and your children and your family, and you're not being supported? When people look at you as this pillar of strength and you don't feel strong, you feel weak. What does that mean? And so I think when people say stuff like that, like, oh, Nsenga, and trust me, Yvonne will tell you, I wasn't going to watch that interview. I don't care about the royal family. Like, seriously.
I was like, girl, are you watching? Turn it on.
I was watching the Critics' Choice Awards.
My Twitter alerts were going off. My people were texting me, and people I trust or think who are smart people. And so I was like, well, what is going on? Let me check out this interview. And then I was riveted. And I think the reason I was riveted, or someone like me who wouldn't normally watch something like this, it was because we actually got some real insights, not the magazine stuff, not the tabloid stuff, but some real insight into what's going on in the lives of these folks, like real conversations, not stuff based around tradition, not stuff based around what the expectations are of what we're supposed to represent or how we're supposed to present ourselves. But Meagham was like, listen, let me go ahead and tell y'all what's going on over there. And just spilled all the tea. And so I was like, this is the interview, Mr. Pierce, and you can always come on and talk to us. But this is the interview that you want people to watch. This one right here is the one you want people to watch, because they get more than just that facade and that, image of what the royal family is. You get the information about what's happening behind the scenes from a credible source, and that does matter.
Well, and I think the other commentary around what allyship is, like, now that we're all hip to diversity, we're all trying to be included, and we all want to talk about our roles, this newfound, which, let's be clear, not to date ourselves. My mother helped send me to college doing Workforce 2000 work back in the 90s when the workforce is going to be different in 2000. Mm-hmm. It ain't different. So, but the allyship and the Kate conversations around how, actually, I know there were like 17,000 articles about me making Kate cry. Kate made me cry. Mm-hmm. And they didn't correct it. Kate apologized and wrote me a note, which I'm sure she has the receipts on to show later if we need to see it, and sent me flowers. But when they put it out there, she didn't come save me. Mm-hmm. There was no allyship. And I think every woman of color, literally sitting any place in the world, can talk about an experience they had where they thought they had an ally, and then they realized they are being stabbed in the front. Mm-hmm. And so people who may not care about the royals, like, I see that brown girl, I'm that brown girl. I know somebody that happened to me. There is not a black woman or a brown woman available who has not had that failure of allyship where you thought you were protected and then you realized as you were going downhill that you really weren't.
Right. And that's such an important point to raise up too, because I think that was one of the big takeaways, right, from this, right? This is supposed to be the new royal family. Right. It's going to be different. It's going to be changed. They have accepted this woman who really does not go along with any of the rules that they have in place.
They're modern now.
Right. So they're going to be this modern place. Even the dress is modern. Like, everything is modern. And then here we are, 2 years later, however long years later, and it is the same thing over and over again. And it made it even worse that, she is mentally distressed, and they're just like, like, go work, girl. You're an actress. Act like you happy over here, and get out, get off my phone.
Yeah. They did a good job of that too. They look good acting too, didn't they? They look good walking around smiling.
They did.
Something you mentioned earlier, Nsenga, about the Me Too movement, and Yvonne, you were talking about this allyship and this discussion that's having, and I think this is some of the folly of that in a lot of ways, right? Is this idea, right, that just because people are, even here in America, right, that people are talking this good game now, and all of a sudden things are just automatically, they're going to change. And and this is something I tell my students, like, I'm just old enough to have seen black folks come in style about 3 times.
Yeah.
And I say, and you think that just because now people are recognizing this kind of ill treatment or these bad behaviors, and people are reading White Fragility, and they're reading Dr. King, and they're reading all these other books, right? And all of a sudden that people are going to behave and start acting differently, right? No, they really aren't. That stuff is ingrained. And like, as you just gave us, I think so succinctly, Yvonne, in that history of, that brief history that you gave about the monarchy, how did we think that this one brown girl was going to come in here and undo all of that, a centuries long, kind of ingrained racism?
Because we don't really want it. We don't want it.
We don't want it.
And because we have hope, because we believe it's possible. Like, if you're brown and you're in the world trying to move forward, you gotta believe it's possible. You gotta have some hope. Yeah, we do.
I don't think I have it.
Yes, you do.
I don't think I got that hope. I don't know. I honestly don't know if I have it.
I'm going to read a quote to you by one of my favorite philosophers who was assassinated, Antonio Gramsci from the 15th century. Says, "I am a pessimist because of intelligence, but an optimist because of will." So I think this we're talking about, like, it's more than hope, it's will, right? Because you lose hope, but just that will and that faith, some people are have faith and some people don't, but that will to keep going, whatever motivates you to do that. As a person of a historically disenfranchised or undervalued or persecuted group, you have that will to keep going, even though the best and what Mark is saying, the best teacher of what you will experience is past experience, right? But we do have the will to go, and so even though all the, I guess, flags were there, and this is what I'm talking about with Meghan. To me, she wasn't naive. To me, it wasn't that she was going to go in there and do that. I think she had the will to have what she wanted, and to fight for love, so to speak, despite all of the things that she was going to face, all the challenges she was going to face. And people keep saying, oh, she wasn't a royal, but she wasn't a scrub either, right? She was moving in these schools anyway. She was on television. She was a millionaire. She's well educated. Again, I'm not saying that because she went to Northwestern,
but she did go to Northwestern,
and we're a little educated over there. So a little bit educated at Northwestern University. So I just think that she had the will to try to do something different and was shocked, into reality. Phil Branch says Black families are still worried about how dark babies are going to be. Look at Phil. This is my friend too. He always stirring it. I love it. Dark babies are going to be, and keeping kids out of the sun and such. It's so ingrained. I'm not sure what my expectations are for anyone. We've all been so damaged.
That's a good question, but I do think the whole dark baby thing, because he had a family friend who told me to come out of the sun one day, and I was like, why? The sun's great. And she was like, too dark.
You didn't got black is what they used to tell us.
Right. Black might not go away. I think it goes back to Will and that piece I wrote for the Burton Wire around racism and what it feels like. And my father has this joke, which is very real, that I am well trained, that Black people who thrive are well trained to suffer through and to push through regardless of whatever happened around us. And if you're successful and you're Black, you've been cut before, and cut a lot. And so when I talk about if you don't bleed out, then you're doing well. Like you are the ones who you see in rarefied spaces. You don't see people in rarefied spaces who can't navigate through those cuts. And so I think Meghan, her background, biracial or not, Black, woman of color, whatever she wants to call herself, she got cut a lot. She had to push through a lot of things to get to the things she did accomplish. And so I think you're right, Nsenga. I think it is will. I mean, maybe it's not hope. The hope is the optimist in me. But I think that if you are willing to thrive and you are determined to be successful on whatever path you're on, if you are of color, it means you have to break through something.
Right.
Yes.
But I think this is important also too, Nsenga, something you said, that she did this for love, not to be this drum major for justice, so to speak.
Yes.
Right.
And we got turned into this.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
This more political way of kind of the way that we think about race or whatever. She was just trying to be with the man she wanted to be with. And it was much bigger than that.
Well, even Harry, he was like, he had some friend that he referenced who says, you got to be careful because, Britain's racist. He was like, oh, no, Britain's not racist. The media is racist. I'm like, the media is Britain. Britain is the media. So
even institutions. Yes.
Right. He talked to Oprah about how he had done the work. Like, he understood he'd done the work, well, like no one else had relayed to you.
He did.
Yeah, and I think that's it. We're about to wrap up, so if anybody has any more questions or comments, please come with them because we have about 5 more minutes. But Yvonne, let's talk about your piece because it was so good. And I think one of the things that we learned, I think that tension that Mark is talking about between Harry and Meghan was really around that issue of racism, right?
Yeah.
And you could see them before they would talk, they would make eye contact, and she would like kind of, you could see the mannerisms in terms of her hands and her holding his hand or not, or like and tugging. Those nonverbals is what we call it in the
body language. Yeah.
There was nonverbals happening.
It was. That's what I was looking at.
Yeah, that people being rude is the same as that people of color, people who are historically disenfranchised, can't understand when they're being discriminated against. They don't know what racism is. It's really somebody just being rude, or that person's a jerk, but they're not a racist. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. I think everyone who was of color has had experience with someone who's not of color, brushing off or dismissing in some way to resolve what you observed as racism. And they'll say, oh no, I know what it's like. I was ostracized as a teenager, or, I was left out in that group. And so I've been left out before. And it's not being left out of a group. Racism is a prolonged, continual, never ending journey. It doesn't turn off. My mother has a saying that somebody reminds her she's Black every day. And I would say sometimes it's joyful. All those reminders aren't bad. Like, I love being Black. It's spectacular. But those reminders can be negative too. I bought a new house recently and someone came in and asked if I was the assistant. I'm not the assistant, I own the house. But I roll with it so the price didn't change. But I think when people call it being rude or they chalk it up to that, it also removes the intention and it also removes your ability to respond. Right. So then you can't react because, it was just like an off-color comment. or it's just that casual racism. And when you change the name of it, like we've gone from diversity to inclusion. First it was race, then it was diversity, now it's inclusion. That waters down the effect, but also waters down your ability to have a response back to it. So I think it's disempowering. I think it's a way, calling it rude is a way of tying it up with a bow and putting it on the shelf that we have to deal with. Because when I say racism, then we have a topic we have to deal with. It can't just be put away and bundled up. And I think it makes people uncomfortable. When you say then that was a racist remark, and I don't appreciate that. And they're like, well, hey, I didn't mean that. Your intention is not whether it's racist or not. Your intention is whether you do it again or not, right? But the remark itself was racist. I think when people make it rude, then it is dismissive of you and your experience.
Right.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
I agree too.
Yeah. So for people who might be, hold on, let me see this. For people who might, 5 minutes late. Okay. For people who might be real quick, for people who might be dealing with what they perceive to be, which is probably happening, racist behavior towards them by a supervisor or what have you. Because like Megan said, hey, which still trips me out every time I think she's like, so I called HR, and then when I couldn't get
I sent an email.
I was like, is there a union or somebody I could talk to? No, I was blown by those comments, blown away. Like just what I want to live in that world. But anyway, what can you say to people who might be experiencing these things on the job, or who with all of these diversity and inclusion officers who are now being appointed or elevated at these corporations? Like, what should people be doing in order to move something beyond someone being rude to being de facto racist, to discuss it in such a way?
So Megan did the right thing. You're supposed to call your HR person or talk to the manager above you or someone who's in a management capacity. Anyone in management capacity has the same legal responsibility. Managers are people, HR people, and you need to use the correct language. When X happened, I felt like it was racist to me. I felt like they were discriminating because I'm a woman or whatever the category happens to be. And you just say that directly. And you need to document it. Megan kept mentioning she had the emails, she had the cards, she had the receipts, is what she said. And so when you have a complaint and you have an issue, you do want to document it. And when people talk to you about it, you want to be transparent. Now, to be candid, what happened with Megan happens to people in the real world, which is thank you for sharing, go back to work. Right. And so then you have some choices to make. Some people stay and they continue to go up the pipeline. Some people leave, like Harry and Meghan, left and abdicated their responsibilities as a royal family. And then in this country, there are legal remedies through some states have an Equal Employment Opportunity Office. And then obviously there's the federal EEOC process. And you can, in fact, adjudicate your claim. And if you're in a union, you can make a grievance. And so there are, in fact, vehicles for most people where they work, but those vehicles aren't always successful. And so I feel, even though I'm a longtime HR leader and I've gotten those complaints, I've dealt with them, I'm very transparent. Every vehicle doesn't always work. And we always those are the ones we hear about in the front page stories of the class action suits. But there is a pipeline. And frankly, social media has changed how companies react. So, you can't have the black box with the check, right? And then be like, I have a hard time with Black employees. When they start posting about their problems, it impacts their bottom line. People respond to that. And so I think there is more of an awareness. There's more of a willingness to be responsive, but we still hear about litigation for a reason. It still happens. I mean, there are several cases that broke through this week at Amazon and a couple other places around women and Black women specifically. And so, you have to use the vehicles in front of you, and you got to be prepared to make a break. Harry and Meghan made a hard left and took a different path. And when you start raising those issues at work, you have to decide if you can thrive in that place or not. And if you can't, for your own mental health, you should move forward.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, this has been a wonderful conversation with you all about the royal family and specifically about Meghan and Harry. I think if you didn't watch the interview, and I'm telling you, I promise you, I had no plans of watching this interview. I had none.
I can't believe that.
I wasn't going to watch. I have ramps running through my head at all times, and Earl Burton running through my head. I don't really fool with the royal family, but
I was like, "Where's the popcorn? Where's the wine?"
If you missed it the first time, they're repeating it Friday. I just read.
Oh, they are.
Thank you. So they are repeating it, but Earl and Beverly, they're coursing through these veins, honey. So I don't really care about the royal family at all. But I'm glad that you texted me and told me I had to watch it. It was great TV, and I'm glad that people really got into it. And if and it gave us some real insight into this. And it also, at the end of the day, reminded us that Oprah is the queen of all television.
All hail. All hail the queen.
All hail the queen. All right, so thank you, Yvonne Cowser Yancy and Dr. Mark Cunningham, for joining us today. Thank you to our viewers for watching. We love having you come back again. We have live streams all the time. And so we want you to stay safe, stay happy, and stay inside until we get this thing under wraps. Okay, we're almost to the end, so just stay the course. All right, thank you.
Bye.